A very good afternoon. I hope you all must have enjoyed lunch. So now welcome back. Now I request Professor S.M. Sajid, former professor from Jamia Islamia, former registrar, pro vice chancellor, and a long time in charge vice chancellor of Jamia Islamia. Sir, please come on the stage. I request Professor Manish Jha, former dean, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and one of the very fine great scholar in the field of social work. Before starting the keynote session, I request both Professor S.M. Sajid Sahab and Professor Manish Jha Sahab to further add on value to the Lifetime Achievement Awards. We also want to facilitate some of our supporters who have been kind enough in helping us to organize this conference. You all must have seen the must be seeing these beautiful saplings. We have with us Dr. Saif Kamran from Supreme Charitable Trust. He was kind enough in sponsoring this. So I request Sajid Saab and Manish Jha Saab to please come up here and please give memento to Dr. Saif Kamran. I request Dr. Saif Kamran from Supreme Charitable Trust to please come on the stage. Yeah. Sajid Saab and Manish Jha. So this is Dr. Saif Kamran from Supreme Charitable Trust. Dr. Saif Saab, thank you very much. And we again look forward for continuous collaboration. Thank you very much. I request both Sajid Saab and Manish Jha Saab to please stay on. I request the next sponsor. You must have been seeing our volunteers with a wonderful kurta, So it is Dr. Ms. Himani Gupta from Kriti Social Initiative. I request Dr. Himani to please come on the stage. And hope in the next conference we may be sponsoring kurtas to all the participants. Yeah. Thank you, Himani ji. Thank you so much, Himani ji. And just one more minute, Sajid sir. And then you might not have seen your bag. In the bag, there is a box. And the box, there is a coffee mug, wonderful coffee mug. So it is Dr. Umar Khan from Helen Keller Institute. I request Umar Khan Saab to please come on the stage. Yeah, volunteer, please. So it's interesting. We just requested Umar Khan Saab to just, if he want to support, he can give us 5,000 rupees. And he said, add one more zero. And that's how these coffee mugs come up. So thank you so much, Umar Khan Saab. And thank you, Sajid sir. Thank you, Manish Jha Saab. Thank you, Umar Saab. So now I know all of us are waiting for the keynote address by Professor S.M. Sajid Sahab, and the chair is Professor Manish Jha Sahab. So before I hand over the things to Professor Jha, I request our team to bring the memento, and I request the chair, Professor Manish Jha Sahab, to give memento to Professor S.M. Sajid Sahab. A big round of applause, please. And with this, now I request the chair, Professor Manish Jha Sahab, to please take up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Janab Shahid Saab, and very warm welcome to all of you in the post-lunch session. And as you could see that the planning of this conference is such that most interesting and enriching session has been kept post-lunch so that we all remain awake and keep the deliberations on. So as you have seen that Professor Janab SM Sajid Sahab is the keynote speaker. And very briefly, I would like to tell you about him. Obviously, in the social work fraternity, he is a renowned and well-known name, and therefore we don't need to say much. But in terms of his academic and administrative competence and capacity, he is one of those people whom we look up to. In terms of his achievements, apart from the numerous national and international projects, publication, and most recent book, Reflections on Social Work Profession, he has led the higher academia from the front. He has been the registrar of Jamia Millia Islamia. He was the pro-vice chancellor. He was acting vice chancellor for roughly around a year. And during this time, in fact, what you keep hearing about Jamia's excellence and continued excellence, some of these momentum has been kept during those days. And those, so in fact, a very wide range of academic and administrative abilities, and which in a way directly or indirectly make social work professionals, social work educators, and social work fraternity understand the importance of the contribution on various facets and various arenas of work. And today's keynote, as you know, the theme of this Indian Social Work Congress is Leaving No One Behind. And it is around that we are talking about the aspects of curriculum and pedagogy. So we can't think of a better person than Janab Professor SM Sajid to deliver a keynote address. And without wasting any time between you and Professor Sajid, I would like to invite him to deliver his keynote address. So over to you.
Thank you very much. I must start by thanking the organizers for giving me this opportunity to interact with you in the form of a keynote address, though there have been more eligible candidates for the purpose. I thank Manish for giving a brief but very generous introduction of my abilities. I sincerely believe that the major source of my identity has been social work, and that is what has really opened the gates for me into the new arenas of academic administration and all others that he mentioned. And that is where I owe a great value to the profession of social work, my teachers, my training, and my students, with the help of who I learned a lot about how to manage people. And that is what the two aspects, how to manage people and how to manage communication. And I think these are two central values which helps you in almost all the endeavors. Today's topic for the keynote is social work curriculum and pedagogy, the contemporary challenges. I wonder, when we talk about contemporariness of any particular issue, for how long this should remain contemporary. If remains contemporary for 10 years or more, is it a positive sign or is it a negative sign? Abraham Flexner asked a question whether social work is a profession nearly 100 years ago. But some of us continue to ask that question even now, which is a reflection and a critical reflection on the progress of social work. No doubt we have made a significant progress. We have achieved a lot in the past 100 years, but still there are certain centralities, certain very vital kind of questions which remain relevant even today. So my attempt with the help of the keynote address is to raise some of these issues in greater and lesser details, because the session which is going to be followed next, my panel speakers, my distinguished colleagues are going to address some of the issues, I think, and more critical issues pertaining to the curriculum, pertaining to the pedagogies, and pertaining to the professional standards of social work. The new millennium, no doubt, has brought major changes resulting in challenges at the global level. Communities across the world are confronting hardships of many kinds, like changing demography, widening disparities between poor and rich, concentration of wealth, reduced welfare spending by the state, and extreme nationalism, racism, war, and human rights violation and terrorism. All these, among other, results in new challenges for human service professions in terms of identity, credibility, and efficacy. Social work by default is a profession aspiring to achieve a just and equal society. Social justice, equality, and human dignity are the core areas where social work educators and practitioners are expected to focus during their professional practice. Interestingly, social work as a service profession centered its curriculum and teaching towards some social problems in many parts of the world and thus aimed for training the workforce to address these emerging social concerns and problems. It is generally expected that social work education as well as practice should be influenced by the social realities and the social issues that are experienced by a society. In other words, formation, implementation, and delivery of social work educational programs, including curriculum, pedagogy, research, teaching, and practice components, should largely be decided or determined by social realities that a particular society experiences. And it is in this context that we need to examine the debates on universalism, contextual social work and international social work, as well as the relevance of curriculum and pedagogy generally adopted by most of the schools of social work in India. Social work profession's expectations from itself, according to some, are too daunting, and they cite promotion of social cohesion, collective responsibility, empowerment, liberation, social justice, and human rights as the example. And I know you can figure out I'm referring to 2014 global definition of social work, which talks about these as some of the major goals of social work profession. Social workers' ability to create a just and equal society depends to a large extent on the profession's ability to influence the political processes and accordingly gearing social work education and practice. And that is where I think the contention lies, because to what extent we are open, to what extent we are able to what extent we feel comfortable to invoke the political processes to achieve all these objectives. The contemporary times, like earlier, are written with many ongoing conflicts between nation states or within them. Only nature of some of these conflicts have undergone a change. In conflict-ridden societies, these objectives become all the more complex and distant. Preventing conflicts in the society on account of above-mentioned reasons, therefore, is a complex phenomena and may be beyond the professional reach of any single profession. However, there is a definite carved-out field of post-conflict social work which focuses on resilience, reconciliation, post-trauma counseling, confidence building, emotional strengthening, etc. We also talk a lot about the global scenario and the global solutions to the global problems and the global perspective of social work. But in order to effectively address the global agenda, social work profession will have to relook at its relationship with the state and non-state actors, including multilateral institutions. It is unfortunate, and I think the recent examples will reinforce what I am going to say. It is unfortunate that credibility of institutions such as the United Nations has been considerably eroded over the past few decades. The reiteration of a just and equitable society by these institutions, therefore, appear more like shallow political promises made at the time of elections in several democratic states. Professional autonomy of social work vis-a-vis state also needs to be carefully reassessed. Role of state as the protector and promoters of rights, freedom, and liberties is under a scanner in several countries. And people now have started calling a welfare state as a charitable state. The collaborative and Cooperative relationship of social work profession with the state, therefore, may not be the answer to creating just, discrimination-free and inclusive society. At times, a non-interventionist state is a party to maintain status quo in the society, while on the other hand, intervention by state may not always be compatible with the global agenda for social work and social development. What are the options available with the profession in the above scenario? Can the profession or should it compete with or confront the state? Can the profession adopt a conflictual strategy to fight for the commitment it has made to the society? Is the profession equipped with knowledge, methodologies, and skills required, and more importantly, the will to do so? These are some of the contentious issues which we need to address in order to continue to be relevant in the contemporary society. I will discuss this a bit more later. In order to assess the performance of social work profession in this area, it is better to collect and document the evidences from across the globe on several dimensions or foci of the global definition of social work, such as empowerment, liberation, cohesion, well-being, etc. Coming to the objectives of social work profession, the scope of social work and its objectives have always remained debatable issues. The confusion evident in the scope and objectives of the profession do obviously impact the curricular and pedagogical strategies adopted by the social work educational institutions. While aspirations and ambitions of the profession stop nothing short of creating a society which is just, free from discrimination, inequality, and oppression of any kind, the method, interventions, and training strategies have not changed much. So, can we address the developmental and social change objectives of social work profession with the strategies which are basically oriented towards the program and service delivery roles? That is a big question. Like H.Y. Siddiqui in 2018, and I quote, he stated, there will never be a consensus on how broad a spectrum of problems the profession should seek to handle, say from individual to social. The law of common sense does not require any further evidence to assert that the wider the scope, the lesser possibility of controlling the outcomes, unquote. Attention needs to be paid to the crucial aspect, and it made more focused and achievable. Coming to the curriculum, we know that curriculum is guided by what we decide and what we articulate in terms of the objectives of the professions, in terms of the strategies, in terms of the scope of the objectives, and what are, if we go by the societal concerns and societal problems and societal hardships, is going to be determined by those considerations. The curriculum is a reflection of those. So emanating from the scope and objectives, curriculum for social work education continues to perpetuate generalities and ambiguities that they contain, because the objectives are such. The social work curriculum itself, along with the delivery issues, poses so many questions that it can keep us usefully employed for weeks together without arriving at any meaningful conclusion. However, a cursory analysis of the curricula followed by several social work institutions in India reveals almost identical content. In the morning, there was, by Dr. Sunita, a mention of a uniform curriculum. We have to seriously think whether a uniform curriculum is desirable or there has to be a variance, because the cultural context, the social realities, the social situations are not uniform. In a country like India, which is very diverse, culturally, socially, economically, demographically, and in so many other respects, I understand that to maintain certain standards in a profession is a requirement. But whether those standards can only be maintained by ensuring uniformity in the curricular and pedagogical interventions, I have my own doubts about it. I think we should be. What has happened at the level of the UGC also, if you realize, there has been an attempt for the past several years to arrive at what is called as the model curriculum. What is a model curriculum? Whether a model curriculum which is followed by TISS is also a model curriculum which one of its off-campus also follows, or one institution in Northeast or one institution in South is also very relevant, or they would like to address some of the regional situations and regional discrepancies and regional problems or certain cultural context. So I think that is something which needs to be paid a bit more and closer attention. So to my mind, the vast majority of schools of social work following identical curriculum is not a very happy situation to be in. This hardly do justice to the knowledge and skill base required for a specialized practice area. Again, I quote H.Y. Siddiqui while elaborating the similar situation. He said, and I quote, "It will be a good beginning for us to start identifying crucial issues in social work education. For example, the scope of professional social work education and practice, analyzing the professional competence level at present, exploring measures to enhance the competence of current and future practitioners," unquote. At the global level, also, closer scrutiny of the curricula reveals several contradictions. Like Shehnaz Savani, Webb, and McCartney in 2020, and I quote, "All social work programs are tasked with the duty of providing curriculum content as well as a learning environment that is free from oppressive practice, prejudices, and discrimination," unquote. It will be interesting to probe into these aspects of learning environment of the schools of social work in India. An analysis of curriculum of various schools of social work in United States by Ortiz and Jani found that, I quote, "issues of race, ethnicity, and gender diversity are covered extensively in curriculum design and development. However, there is less attention paid to issues of religious diversity and differences," unquote. In addition to the above, we are still struggling to adequately address the following questions. Can the remedial or clinical model be combined with the developmental model? That is first question. I know we have been using different terminologies, also alternative terminologies to describe and to express remedial, clinical, or developmental, and these may be by some considered as outdated. But whatever expression you use, I think the social work practice and emphasis can be categorized into these 3 or 4 broad categories. So the question number 1 is, can the remedial or clinical model be combined with the developmental model? Number 2, whether the clinical model will focus primarily on the use of social work intervention at the micro and meso levels, covering a wide variety of settings. Whether a developmental model or system change model would exclusively focus on social work interventions at the macro level. Question number 3, whether designing separate courses with specific objectives seems to be the only way of solving the present dilemma of social versus the professional or personal versus the political. Now, coming to the part which is beyond the criticism, I think the earlier part has been self-reflection and self-critical. Now, what is the way ahead? Of course, there are various approaches, there are various ways in which we can address the problems, but according to me, in a limited sense, because of my limited intellect and because of the limited time that I have been able to devote, I think social work as a profession needs to clearly define its area of work, commitment, and ways through which it claims to improve the well-being of individuals, groups, and communities. Though numerous studies have suggested different ways and models like the task-centered model, the problem-solving model, remedial or therapeutic model, but it is doubtful that the social work professionals have been able to bring the revolutionary changes which the profession claims to achieve. And therefore, as social work educators and researchers, we need to do brainstorming on the following points. Again, these points are in the form of questions. I unfortunately do not have answers to the questions. I have only tried to articulate the relevant questions. And it is a joint collaborative interprofessional effort which is required to find the relevant or correct answers. So whether a profession on its own has the capacity to bring about such a huge social change which requires a political action and will, irrespective of the competing interest of the corporate sectors on the one hand and largely voiceless, unrepresented masses on the other hand. That is question number one. How can we really do that? Whether engagement with these structures, as the definition talks about, whether engagement with these structures are merely going to be defined by largely persuasive discourse to empower and liberate people from discrimination and exploitation, or it will have to take a confrontationist or conflictual approach in which, the word of caution, in which, and maybe imminent, in which the state may assume an adversarial role. Third, what are those knowledge domains and skill sets, along with attitudes and commitment levels required to become empowering and liberating and social change functionaries under the garb of professional social workers, and whether the institutions have the resources and capacities to transact these. And fourth, which is very important, I think, because I think a lot is going to depend on that also, that what are the motivation of young students who are joining social work education, and how many of them are really interested and comfortable with undertaking arduous work of social change, empowerment and liberation. This, of course, is based on the assumption that enough employment opportunities will be available to them for this kind of work. It also is contingent upon how do we market social work to the young aspirants. Generally, we market, or the trend is that the employability is one of the marketing strategy for social work profession. It is not the kind of work, it is not the kind of aura created around the social transformation and social change and social reform that we are able to undertake by practicing social work as a profession. I hope the future studies will seriously reflect upon these questions and will come out with effective solutions which will ensure acceptance of social work as a professional activity capable enough to achieve certain targeted goals on its own. The effectiveness of social work profession has been questioned both within and outside the profession. The desire and hope of many within the profession to make the world more just, equal, sensitive, and caring has not matched by the commensurate professional outcomes. Professional tools and instruments used have somehow not brought about the kind of structural changes proclaimed by the profession. There remains an urgent need to rethink and rediscover the appropriate knowledge, attitude, and skills set needed to achieve what we want to achieve. It will also not be out of place to revisit the professional agenda in view of the experiences gained by the profession over the last more than 80 years. Indigenous sources needs to be vigorously tapped and extensively integrated into the pedagogy of social work profession. Addressing some of the critical issues head-on rather than skirting them will make the profession and its contribution more distinct. One example which comes to my mind is sidestepping the various social conflicts which exist in the communities where we work. I wonder how, without addressing these conflicts, we can make these communities empowered, self-reliant, and capable to thwart the possibilities of exploitation and abuse by the vested interests. Do we really address these kind of conflicts, which may be on account of local resources, which may be on account of the priorities of development, which may be on account of identities? So how much of these conflicts we are, as social workers, trying to address or sidestepping to deliver the services which we are tasked to deliver to the communities, which is the agenda of the organizations which employ us. Likewise, there are other issues requiring introspection and unhindered dialogue with the social work profession, as also with the others helping professions to develop an understanding and a strategy to check the erosion of humanitarian values and striving for enrichment of quality of human life. What is our engagement with other helping professions? Is it of a desirable level and extent? Or do we consider addressing these social problems, structural and otherwise, as the sole exclusive domain of social work profession alone? In my opinion, this is not possible without cooperating and collaborating with the like-minded individuals and groups, be they social or political, and taking into their fold the voluntary social work, other helping professions, and creating a synergy between social work education and practice, and making their partnership constructive and achievement-oriented. The challenge to social work profession in India, the challenges to social work profession in India are perhaps far greater than the other contexts due to huge diversity of culture, geography, rural urban locations, ethnicities, distribution of social, economic, and political power, etc. It is therefore a huge responsibility on us, the social work educators and practitioners, to objectively assess what we have been able to achieve and what not and why. I'm leaving the part on indigenization because I see there are going to be sessions and people are going to speak on it. But I'll come to the last part of my presentation, which is about the scope, objectives, and definition of social work, which has been unanimously agreed by ISW and IFSW way back in 2014. And NAPSWI has also come out with its own regional definition. I have been attempting to throw open an alternative definition of social work for the past 5 years, and now I get somewhat confident to present it to you for seeking your feedback, criticism, suggestions, and ideas. Because I think re-examination of 2014 global definition of social work is also needed to make the agenda of social work profession more realistic and achievable. A modest attempt is made hereunder to redefine social work, particularly in the context of Global South. And I quote, social work is a profession to help individuals, groups, and communities to critically assess their situations and alter their relationship with significant others if they so feel the need. It also helps people to understand and assess their capacities to change themselves, others, and restricting situations, including the environment in which they operate, and strive to acquire and improve the required skills for the purpose. Social work believes in the value of human dignity, social justice, and human rights, and with the help of theories of behavioral sciences, social sciences, and social work, helps people to address life challenges by working in collaboration with other helping professions and civil society. Unquote. It is hoped that this will trigger much needed debate and attempt to redefine social work globally. Comments and suggestions, therefore, in this regard are very welcome. I thank you very much for your very precious time which you have given to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janab Professor S.M. Sajid, for your extremely enriching presentation by way of keynote address, where you have cautioned the audience or the people here that you are not providing any solution or you don't have a solution. You are posing some question for our reflection, deliberation, and taking it forward from there. So I don't wish to, or neither this comprehensive presentation or keynote cannot be summarized, but there I could find some takeaway for myself, and that I would like to, just by way of conclusion, I would like to bring that on board, and probably that might help all of us for future deliberation. So, what I could gather from this speech is that certain questions are looming large in front of us, And there has also been a tendency that somewhere either we are sidelining those or not confronting it upfront. So while we are dealing with these issues on an everyday activity, but there are things which needs to be taken on board with much more confidence and assertion. It is also saying that the social realities are not too harmonious. Social realities, as on this date, is quite conflictual. It has always been, but in due course of time, in the present context, we see all over the world, it is the rupture is far more greater, more violent. Human dignity and human survival is also at risk in many spheres of life. So, where do we find the scope for and the nature and character of social work engagement in the peace and conflict situation? So in a peace and conflict, what kind of conflict situation one can engage with so that the durable peace can be looked at and engaged with. So, and therefore the need of the relationship of social work with the state and non-state actors, which he has highlighted very clearly. And therefore this tendency of, you can say that, indirectly questioning welfare state by making the language or the terminology of charitable state or the language of beneficiary, shifting it from entitlement and rights to the, like, that some benefits and doles are being given by the state. So those are the things also comes back to social work profession, that how we engage with these issues, how we bring back the rights and entitlement discourse in a particular way. That is something for, and all of these, then how it does it get situated in the curriculum. And this idea that what he has indicated is the problematic of the model, so to say, or problematic of uniformity of, so how to deal with it, while for the profession, for curriculum, for recognition, you also need certain kind of standard to be set for curriculum. But at the same time, in such a diverse country like ours and such a complicated situation in which we live in, how those models will operate, is it desirable, is it required, what kind of diversity element should be kept open. And that's where the question of social, political, personal, political, social, professional, those things need to be revisited, needs to be deliberated upon. And both local and global definition, how, where does it, you can, what are the spaces of fusion for that, where do we see that at the larger grand aspect that the global definition should be like this, and then what are the elements where the local and the global gets connected, what are the things which then, how definitions can be unpacked, how definition can be elaborated upon and made clear for all of us, so to relate with it and feel motivated. Because it is the curriculum and pedagogy is also that, how do we look at new generation which is coming up, the issue of jobs, the issue of employment, the issue of earning, the issue of taking care of family and their everyday life, and at the same time the demands of the field, the demands of the society, where certain kind of work will never give you enough remuneration and certain kind of work will certainly give you more remuneration. Then how to deal with those issues and those contexts is something. So because I was taking copious note, I don't consider myself as a good a person who takes lots of notes, but I was taking those notes, and I thought that it gave me certain ideas to look at, to examine, and in subsequent plenary as well as parallel sessions, the participants here would get enough opportunity to reflect on that, or whatever they are proposing to present on, they can also draw upon some of those things. So I would, on behalf of myself and the audience, the organizer, NAPSWI, and the university, MANUU, I would like to thank you. And it's a kind of gratitude for us that you have kindly agreed to come and provided such an illuminating keynote address. So thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor Manish Jha sir and Professor Sajid Saab sir. Actually, we are not going for break, so we will continue the session. So quickly, I come forward here to start the next session, which is plenary session. So I request you, sir, please.
ये समझ गया थोड़े कहे को ज्यादा समझ गया
जी, जी, जी. So, as we people are familiar about the next session, which one is plenary. This is first session, plenary session. For this session, we have 4 plenary speakers. First one is Professor Murli Desai, madam. She is from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Earlier, she was professor there. Second speaker is Dr. Ajit Kumar. He is from Matru Seva Sangh, Institute of Social Work. Earlier, he was there. Now he's somewhere else. Third one is Professor Zubair Minai Saab. He is from Jamia Millia Islamia. And last one is Professor A. Ramaiya sir. He is from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. All these are eminent social work educated. I would like to request to all you people, please come over the stage. I missed the chair, Professor Agni Mitra madam. Because of her, we can't do anything. So I welcome you, ma'am. She is from Delhi University.
An extra chair.
I request volunteer to come forward along with the memento. I would request Professor Neera Agni Mitra madam to present memento to Professor Zubair Minai sir. I would request second volunteer, please come. Again, ma'am, I have to request you, please give the memento to Dr. Ajit Kumar sir. I would request to Professor Muhammad Shahid Saab to present memento to Professor A. Ramaiya sir. Again, I request Professor Muhammad Shahid Saab to present memento to Professor Thank you very much, sir. I have no word to say right now because all the eminents are here. They will speak all these things related with the subject. So I'm handovering this session to Chair, ma'am. Please.
Adab, good afternoon to all on this very warm afternoon. Warm not because of the weather and the climate, but warm on account of the emotions and the feelings that I think are throbbing in this auditorium. And I take this opportunity to thank Shahid and his team, thank MANUU for giving us all. I always say that, the Congress is like a confluence where so many rivers come and meet. So it's like that Sangam. And I think more than the deliberations, it is the connect that we are able to create that really spurs us on. So honored to be sitting with a panel which is so distinguished, all luminaries, stellars in their own right. The overarching theme is, of course, social work curriculum and pedagogy challenges in contemporary times. And I just had the opportunity of glancing at the themes that these distinguished speakers are going to touch upon. And I saw such a rich tapestry, of themes, all of which weave into a very rich mosaic, of this very, very core integral component that we, must be touching base with. When I was sitting there and listening to Professor Sajid and listening to all the questions, I was somewhere feeling the irony of things, that we are a profession. We should have had a curriculum, right? But still we are, and I've written an article on being on the crossroads, and I don't like that article much because I always feel that it's time for us to move beyond the crossroads. But still, we are kind of still encountering so many crossroads, which is positive and negative both. I mean, it is positive that when you're confronted with, a crossroad situation, you would think of a way out. But nonetheless, curriculum, you see, as all the speakers in the morning have talked about, we are living in very difficult times, very tumultuous times, very challenging times, where changes are happening by leaps and bounds, where the gap between yesterday, today, and tomorrow is ever widening. And therefore, the need to evolve a dynamic, a contextual, and a responsive curriculum is integral to what we do as educators and practitioners. The other thing which Professor Sajid also talked about, and I had also just jotted down in the morning, is also the context from where our learners come from. This is the first time that I'm teaching a class which has been drawn through the CUET. And, the diversity is amazing. It's a strength and an asset, but it is also very difficult as an educator to pitch, you see, because the diversity is overwhelming. So you have educants and learners who come from very remote backgrounds and who would rather that I teach in Hindi. And then we also have educants and learners who completely do not understand Hindi, very cosmopolitan or foreign students or students from the South. Not only that, with this MCQ batch, MCQ entrants who seem to be just ticking boxes and getting admissions to our courses, again, their level of their proclivity to do social work, they come with different interests, different motivations, and, different levels of commitments. So how do we create a curriculum which somewhere embraces all of them, brings them on board? So all of these are challenges that probably some of our distinguished speakers will touch base on. So without saying anything much, also just one more thing that I'd like to add, I also feel that the national education policy is also presenting for us multiple problems, because we have 4 years and 2 years and a master's, 1 year, 2 year, or no master's, PhD without doing a master's. So all of these are also very big questions that we need to look at when we are devising our curricula for the future. So with that little bit of a background, I think I'd like to have the honor of inviting our first speaker, our most distinguished, most dearest fraternity member, Professor Desai, to come and speak. I believe it says 25 minutes, yes. Would you like something to?
I'll stand here, but and I'm right here. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Maybe that way you can't see. नहीं बैठ के I won't be comfortable.
No, ये नहीं
I
आएगा.
can use this.
Okay. Yeah, this. Okay.
Stand है बाहर
No, no,
निकल
no.
निकल. Very good afternoon to everyone. I must start with what Dr. Armaiti Desai created when she first became the director, the shortest director at Tata Institute. So all these mics in the conference hall, she made a platform, and it was so convenient for people like me to have those. So maybe not in curriculum, but in institution building, I think we can incorporate some of such ideas to be inclusive. Okay, first, Thanks a lot to NAPSWI that we get these opportunities to meet colleagues from all over India, some from outside of India as well. And more than years and more than sessions, what really we gain out of these congresses is a lot of collective sense, a lot of camaraderie, and a lot of feeling of we are not alone, we are all together. Yes, there are challenges, yes, there are problems, but we are all together. So thank you, NAPSWI, for creating these opportunities. Thanks a lot to MANUU for an excellently planned congress. Very well, all the nuances are also worked out, and I feel very privileged to be here today and to talk to you. Okay, now when it comes to the theme, this has been the theme of my career, actually, curriculum planning and pedagogy. And I must go back a little bit to how it all started. Yes, I made the title My Experiments. Like Sunita said in the morning, her NGO is like a lab. For me, my career has been also like a lab, full of experiments, because again, I was fortunate to have been working at the Tata Institute, where I could really work out a lot of different strategies, implement, evaluate, monitor, change, get the feedback. And we could change our syllabus almost every year. Unlike most of the schools of social work where you had boards of studies and then, procedures, and even after all that, you may not be able to change much. So at the Institute, this dynamism was inbuilt, and I took a lot of advantage of that. And I must start with my PhD in the US, where the churning started in me about this whole subject. Of course, as a student in schools, colleges, one always thought of, well, if this was taught to me before this topic, it would have made more sense. Or if the teacher had put it in this way, I would have understood better. One didn't know the words curriculum or pedagogy that time. But yes, those feelings were always there. And a lot of churning took place, not because it was the US and superior or anything, but because it was so different. And that's what helps, when you go out of your comfort zone into a new culture, a new system, then you start rethinking. You start recreating what you want to do as your life plan, your career plan. So this churning started on several counts. First of all, it's critical thinking that I was introduced to at that time. And again, not because it was US, but that was the time. I went to the US in 78. In the 70s is when a lot of social movements were gaining ground, and questioning of the givens, the structural givens were taking shape. Although I did my master's in 71, 73, but I did not learn to do critical thinking at that time in Tata Institute. No. We were taught people have problems because they are lazy. Okay, there was no structural understanding that I was given, no critical thinking at all. So by the time I've worked in the field for 4 years and went to the US for my PhD, critical thinking was gaining ground all over the world, probably in India as well. Definitely in India as well, because when I came back, it was all there at the Institute, definitely. So critical thinking is what made me start questioning. What critical thinking itself started questioning was the US curriculum of social work, right? And it also then stimulated me to look at Indian curriculum. It's not that we've not had curriculum, right? Whatever we've had has been changing in order to make it more relevant. But it may not have been done in a very organized way, although we had 2 model curricula prepared. But I'm not sure whether or how much they were really helpful. So this whole rethinking of is it relevant? Is it making sense? Is it offered at the right time? Is this how I want to learn, in India or in the US? So that churning started a lot. And unlike my other friends, Indian friends in the US who didn't want to come back, make a career in the US, I was so excited to want to come back. And I was so excited when I got the job at Tata Institute to really make this whole curriculum thing as my theme of my career, with two basic reference points. One was indigenization. I was frowned upon because I came with a PhD from the US. What do you know about India? What is happening in India? But believe me, I was probably more interested in indigenization of knowledge, indigenization of curriculum, everything. Because I was in another culture. Again, coming back to India, I had to recreate myself. And these are very, very exciting processes that I undertook. So at that time, yes, so one was indigenization, the other reference point was globalization. Globalization had not yet started in the sense of the 1990s, not in that sense, because I joined Tata Institute as a faculty in 1984. So, but globalization, because I'd come back with some very good ideas as well from the US, which I thought made sense, which were not being taught in India. So a lot of scattered ideas and critical thinking of not taking anything for granted, but question them with reference to how relevant they are, and are they helping to achieve the goals of social justice, social development, which are, to me, these are the terms that really make a lot of sense to what social work is all about. And with that, that mindset, I planned my own career. That was another thing at the institute. You really can define your own job profile, what research you want to take, which courses you want to teach. My current colleagues at the institute may or may not agree if things have changed, but that was the experience I had when I was working at the institute. So this is why I started curriculum planning as my theme. How I did it? First, yes, critical thinking, definitely. Not leaving any stone unturned. We are hearing very good, we've heard all these good statements in the morning, very relevant. So whatever project I undertook, it had to be based on everything that is written on that, the interdisciplinary foundation. And I was appointed in the unit for family studies. And I realized that family studies and family social work had no connection. In the institute, we had these research units so that our teaching and our practice gets linked to research, and so it is more rigorous, right? But family studies talked about how family was changing from joint to nuclear, which was a major theme. And family course that I was given to teach was talking about Freud and what happens in the Oedipus stage and what happens in the latency stage and so on. So disjointed. And how was this helping us in our field? What was the linkage of research and teaching and practice? I really saw so many gaps over there. And again, it was a good opportunity being in family studies to really do a kind of a total survey of what is being researched with reference to family. What relevance does it have to social work practice? And then how can we convert it into curriculum? So I organized this seminar on review of research on family studies, identifying different categories of family studies and scholars, inviting social work educators who taught these courses, inviting practitioners who were practicing in the field. And then we had this collaborative discussions on these different aspects. And where do we meet? How can we make use of the research for practice? And how do we convert it into curriculum? And that seminar resulted in a lot of new understanding for everyone, mainly for me. It's kind of the concern with which I had started. And I realized that, yes, if we really keep our minds open, not take anything for granted, then we can really arrive at a very relevant curriculum, which is knowledge-based and practice-based. Similarly, then after this workshop on review of family studies, I planned a workshop on developing socio curriculum on family. And because that was just a very natural consequence of what we had done in the previous seminar. So then the next seminar, the focus was totally on curriculum. And the courses that we developed were definitely linking what is the knowledge base and therefore what is the practice needed in that knowledge area. So if it's institution, family as an institution, then the knowledge, what knowledge requires for the field is family laws. Family laws are all based on family as an institution. Family life education, what is that based on? A lot on family dynamics, right? Family intervention, if we talk in terms of our social work methods or counseling or therapy, what are the problems that we are talking about? So again, linking knowledge to practice, moving to curriculum in a very systematic way. So everything sounds good so far, good appreciation, publications were brought out on these different aspects. So then what is the problem? Yes, there is still a problem. As an experiment, yeah, one does a lot of homework and tries out and all that. And there are setbacks and there are lessons to be learned. After I stopped teaching family, and moved to other subjects, a new teacher of family came to see me one day and said, I've been given this course, please tell me what to read. Okay. So after so many publications that were brought out on curriculum on family, what happened? Why does a new teacher doesn't know that all this has been done? So there were lots of lessons learned with reference to how does a new teacher start teaching a course, or what happens when you publish something? Do people read? Is it being used to develop courses unless UGC makes it mandatory? A lot of questions there, and yes, most of these questions have no answers, except that we need to pay attention to this. We need to read, we need to share feedback, we need to critically appraise what others have done, we need to build on what others have done, and if there are limitations. So basically sharing, right? Or doing it together as a collective. Both these exercises were collectively done with other colleagues in Tata Institute and outside. But at the national, and definitely also at the national level. But then as an association or as a kind of a system that we don't have at the national level for social work curriculum building, where all the initiatives that different individuals make in their own teaching. These are my experiments. I'm sure all of you have done different kinds of experiments. What happens to them, right? So we need a depository. We need people to read what others are doing. We need sharing. We need to learn from each other. We need to consolidate. We need to move. Otherwise, if every teacher is going to start from square one, I don't think it is a profession. A profession means that the profession grows, whether the teacher remains there or not. So this interdisciplinary foundation, curriculum planning are some of the experiments that I started with. Pedagogy, in fact, together with review of family research, the first course I said I was asked to teach was family dynamics, right? About Freud, etc., as I just said. And teaching it for a course, I was so frustrated. I changed the syllabus based on the review of family studies that were there, based on understanding what family is all about in India, mainly. See, family is a subject most difficult to teach. Why? Because we all think we know. Everyone grows up in a family, most of us. right? So why do we need to teach or do any studies? We know what is family, right? So yet, looking at this whole range of studies that were done, it was very enlightening that so many things we take for granted were really not true. The myths around family or the absence of any women's perspective that time was not there at all. So I kind of merged women's studies with family studies, you know, incorporated the latest ideologies about child rights. None of these were there. I mean, imagine if you were only talking about psychosocial stages of Freud and Adler and all that. Where do you fit in all these other things? So, yes, I changed the syllabus. It was accepted. The name of the course was changed from Family Dynamics to Family in India, and which gave a lot of scope for interdisciplinary study, understanding on family. Second thing that I tried out in that course was change in pedagogy. For the first time in Tata Institute, I used the seminar method. Because family in India, if you're talking about changes in family, etc., and all these different studies that were done, lectures would be so boring. And anyway, lectures, teaching method to me is quite something to be replaced, definitely in social work education. What I did was I allocated topics to different students. I gave them the basic readings for each topic, and they would prepare, show me what they had prepared, and they would be the teachers in class. It was, I think, a class of about 15, 16 students. And yes, we had 15 weeks, right? So more or less everyone was getting enough time to do their presentation. And everyone was supposed to then discuss, ask questions. And a lot of learning, a lot of vibrant discussion took place in class. And at the end of the year, when the students shared their evaluation of the curriculum with the director, they said this was the first time they were ever exposed, because these are specialization students. So it was their second year. So they said it was the first time they were exposed to the seminar method, and they learned much more than they did when they were taught. Okay. So that was another experiment which really worked quite well. And that, I must say that I can't say there were setbacks, except when there are large classes, the generic courses, where seminar method would be very difficult. But then there would be other methods like small group discussions and so on. So it was, in terms of curriculum planning and pedagogy, which go side by side. In fact, the meaning of curriculum would include pedagogy. But I agree that we should talk about both of them separately so that we don't lose out on either of them. Otherwise, curriculum would include, without pedagogy, what is curriculum? Just content of topics, right? So that is not totally a curriculum. Then what happened was, in terms of my responsibilities when they moved from family studies to heading social work education and practice cell, which was more to do with training of social work educators through UGC-sponsored refresher courses and other training programs that anyone in the institute would like to plan, were being coordinated by this department. And so this whole pedagogy of training, which is so much more facilitating of learning rather than teaching. There's so much more of experiential sharing or discussion, small group discussions, and so on. So much, I mean, because we believe that these are all teachers who are coming for these refresher courses, so they don't need lectures. But then I felt very seriously that no one needs lectures. The pedagogy word itself is teaching the child, right? Can you lecture a child? Will the child learn? No. The child needs an experiential way of learning. And then we say andragogy for the older adults or the adults. Also, we need experiential work. They cannot also be given lectures. So who should be given lectures? Why should anyone be given lectures, right? So if we can see teaching role as a role of facilitating learning, creating situations based on the objective learning outcome of your course, whether it's small group discussion, seminar method, role plays, or a lot of self-reflection exercises. When I started teaching history and philosophy of social work, and one was trying to incorporate the history of ideologies that have influenced social work, one realized that we have such strong mindsets and beliefs about so many things. Again, why people are poor, whether they are lazy, so they are poor, or whether they are structural constraints. We have our own ideas when we enter a social work program, right? So what I realized very important is to have a self-reflection exercise on what I think about these different things and why. Why is very important to question yourself. Are you taking certain beliefs for granted? And there are also questions in this exercise on how I look at people who are less, or should I say, economically lower than me, and those who are economically above me. Whether I get a sense of power, difference in power, when I'm relating to those who are poorer than me or those who are richer than me, what sense of power do I feel? So a lot of these questions help students to reflect on their beliefs and why they are there. And those made a lot of difference in terms of understanding what the course was all about compared to what a lecture could have given, right? So very different kinds of exercises or strategies or methods that were used and that can be used, also developed more as experiments. And my partners in these experiments, not guinea pigs, were the students. I would say definitely partners, because it's their questions, their feedback. It's a question that would make me wonder, did I sequence this properly? Why have they not understood this? Have I used a proper method? So constantly learning from the students and every year revising, like I said, was the exciting part. When I moved to the social work education and practice cell, another experiment that I did was looking at all these methodologies. How do you plan curriculum? How do you develop pedagogy? How do you develop knowledge? How do you conduct training programs? And then I published, I used to write and present some of these sessions to the refresher course where there would be a theme. So I would find some 1 or 2 hours where I would introduce, one of these different areas of curriculum planning and pedagogy. Those then I compiled together and published as a book. Whatever experiments I did, after say a period of minimum 5 years to maybe 10, 15 years, I would think I'm ready to publish a book on it. I would have done so much research and writing, and then I would publish a book. But then, like I said, there are achievements and there are setbacks and there are lessons learned. One major strategy that I used, which was practice-based research, right? Linking theory to research. One was to bring the practitioners and educators and researchers together at a seminar. The other was to actually carry out practice-based research. Since I was an academician, there were several projects that I undertook to start with all the field action projects of my department, as is family and child welfare. So we carried out so many different kinds of studies where, like, again, Sunita was saying, the ground reality required knowledge, right? So what kind of research do we carry out there? So how do we decide on what research is to be done from the actual practice situation? And they were, all of them, found to be so useful. Then I used to conduct for every batch workshops on practice-based research. How do you conduct practice-based research in the beginning of a project, during a project, at the end of the project? What are the different things that you would learn, at different phases of a practical exercise? And yeah. You conclude? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, So the last point about coordinating, collaborating between educators and practitioners is where I will conclude. And this is another area where there are lots of concerns because there are lots of different perspectives of how the practitioner sees this project and how the educator sees it. And there are different ideas of what authorship is all about, why should one cite sources of what one is writing, the way academicians look at it. The practitioners would think this is my work. Why is the academician appropriating my work? So that area also we conducted again a workshop on knowledge development in social work when I was the associate editor of the Indian Journal of Social Work. Lot of interesting ideas came up. People were all equally concerned. But at the end of it, where are we today? I don't know. I really don't know. And so, yes, satisfaction while we do this work, and future torchbearers have to take it ahead is all we can wish, because otherwise, the profession doesn't grow, because we are all doing great work, but unless we share and move together, the profession doesn't grow. Thank you very much and all the best.
Thank you so much, Professor Desai. I think ma'am has raised many questions which, succinctly put together. I think, I would like to say that if some of our, because people like her are also becoming, we were talking in the morning about rare species, and people like Professor Desai are also becoming more and more rare. And I would strongly recommend that, people like her take a master class for educators, because these experiments, we are glad that she's sharing this. I mean, I'm impressed with the the amount of commitment, consistency, constant validation of all that she did, critiquing her own self, critiquing the work. I think this is becoming increasingly rare, and this is something that we need to do, because this profession demands commitment at every level. And what she has demonstrated is how important it is for us to be committed to engaging with curriculum and pedagogical engagement, because we may craft a very beautiful curriculum, but how do we deploy it? How do we kind of integrate it? Because it's not just about knowledge. You see, it's about, she talked about attitudes and mindsets being so deeply ingrained and embedded. How do we change? How do we change attitudes? How do we integrate values in this very diverse set of neophytes that we confront in our classrooms? And I think ma'am has raised, interdisciplinary. Somewhere we are all withdrawing into our own individual silos, not only in terms of disciplines, but also in terms of our own work, where we are not reading what others are generating. We're only focused on what we are producing, and whether it is relevant or not, whether it is really required or not. The whole pedagogy of teaching and training, that is also essentially very important. I thought also that her point about the need for critical reflection, sometimes don't mind my saying that, but many of us educators also do not really know the essence of critical reflection, right? And that is something that we need to integrate in ourselves and our students. We began with a small exercise, ma'am, of journal writing, and it was so valuable, because students do not know how to reflect. Coming from where they do, in terms of their foundational learning, they cannot, and Varun and Namami are here, and they conducted this whole experiment of journal writing, and it was a big success in our department. So I think all of that, what she has said is a lot of meaning. I've carried notes, ma'am, and hope that others have too, and we make a lot of, we really value and find it relevant, what all you have said. Now I invite the next speaker to come and speak. He, again, Dr. Ajit Kumar is going to speak on challenges addressed and self-doubts resolved, social work in India today. And I see a link in terms of, what I can envision between Professor Desai and you, sir. Thank you. Please come.
Friends, Adab and Namaskar. I have revised the title a bit. It's Challenges Addressed and Self-Doubts Resolved, the Social Work Journey in India. I am dating the social work journey in India to the first decade of the 20th century. And I am referring to two institutions, the Servants of India Society set up in 1905 and the Social Service League set up in 1911. And this idea I have borrowed from the Abhijit Mishra paper. That's why I asked whether he's around. If he's around, so thanks to him. Now, my preliminary argument is that in the last, say, 110 years, social work has established itself in three areas. In the domain of higher education, it's carved out some niche areas in development policy, for example, regarding women and children, and in several of the implementing structures, trained graduates are employed. So this much has been achieved. And this was possible because in the last 3-4 decades, a large number of social work graduates have been produced. And many of them have been active in the practice field. And one of the striking achievements for me is there are about 10 state-level associations of social workers spread, I think, roughly more in the southern and the western part of the country. So this success, this effectiveness was possible only when several challenges were resolved. In this paper, I focus on two challenges. One is the internal challenge and one is the external challenge. By internal challenge, I'm referring to the challenge of legitimacy. And by external challenge, I'm referring to the challenge of relevance. So these two challenges were, in a way, kind of foundational questions. And one would notice, particularly in the pages of the Indian Journal of Social Work, that most social work educators have a lot of doubts about their own profession. And in my paper, I'm referring to two educators. One is Professor Siddiqui and one is Professor Srivastava. So Professor Siddiqui sometime in 87 said that the social profession has a very low credibility. 10 years later, around about in 1999, Professor Srivastava says that the demise of social work is not too far away. And he quotes 7 senior social work educators. So in the 80s and 90s, it was all those, many who were involved in teaching had doubts how effective were their profession. Now, these doubts came because of two reasons which I mentioned just now, the challenge of legitimacy and the challenge of relevance. Now, what was the legitimacy challenge? To me, there was something called the 20th century voluntary organizations, which brought in the element of challenge. And these 20th century voluntary organizations emerged in India in the beginning decades of the 20th century. And this is where the paper of Abhijit Mishra was of help to me. Because in this paper, he says, the idea of training in India was introduced by Gopal Krishna Gokhale's organization and Narayan Malhar Joshi's organization. The Dorab Tata Graduate School came 3 decades after. So already these two institutions were training the volunteers who were involved in service work. So the idea of training was already there. And this idea of training was superimposed on an old Indian tradition of seva. In India, we all know that seva bhavi is a kind of a norm or a value. It was already there. But probably most of the seva bhavi work was done either on a religious basis or on a caste basis. So these two organizations, when they brought in training, a new organization emerged. It took a more modern form. So on one hand, you had seva. On the other hand, you had social service organizations coming with training. This was also the era of the freedom struggle. So a large number of Indians were either involved politically in the freedom struggle or many who were not politically inclined, but did feel that the nation had to be built up. So nation building activities was also an important element. So in that spirit, many Indians, men and women, got into social service. So we had a combination of three. You have Seva traditional, you have modern service, you have the larger nationalist feelings, feeling of altruism, that's something you must do for the nation. Some economic improvements, some social improvements. In this era came Tagore and later on Gandhi. Tagore had set up in 1924 the Institute of Reconstruction at Sriniketan, part of Shantiniketan campus. And if you see his project, he gave a lot of emphasis on productivity, on agricultural sciences, and he had a fairly modern structure. There were hierarchies. So Tagore was quite different from Gandhi. Gandhi, once he came on the Indian scene in 1920, gave a big impetus to the social service organizations. And in particular, in 1936, when he decided to shift permanently to a village called Shegaon, which is a backward village about 75 kilometers from Nagpur. And this village within 4 years was renamed as Seva Gram, village of service. So Gandhi, Tagore, social service training, Seva, all this combined. And the final complement to this was that in the Indian imagination, the village community has a special significance. And for many Indians, it is a part of their golden past, a time when these communities were self-sufficient, interdependent, and you had a genuine community life. Of course, this is not an opinion which many will share. And Dr. Ambedkar had given quite different opinions about what the Indian village truly represented. So the argument in this paper which I put up is, all these elements together formed the 20th century organizations, and after independence, they emerged on the Indian scene in a very big way. Gandhi passed away in 1948, but his several followers, the institutions continued, and they continued doing constructive work. And in this paper, I take the examples of two people. There were several others. So one was Jayaprakash Narayan. So in 1964, at the initiative of Jayaprakash Narayan, a dialogue was held between professional social workers and Gandhian constructive workers. The professional social workers were led by Dr. Gore, and the Gandhian workers, they spent 2 years. They had a study group. And in this dialogue, the agenda was to bridge the gap between the two. Now, you bridge the gap between the two only because the gap exists. Now, towards the end, Dr. Gore takes a very clear stand. He says that Gandhian constructive work is a movement, social work is not. Gandhian constructive work is a mission, social work is not. In case of social work trained graduates, the question of salaries will come up. So it was very clear that the gap was not bridged. But the work continued. And many of us who have gray hairs here will recall Jayaprakash Narayan, will recall the emergency period, will recall another person, Vinoba Bhave, and his Bhudan movement. So these are all issues in which the Gandhian personalities and the Gandhian constructive works, they involve seriously. Now, this was the time when social work institutions was just coming up. It was on a smaller scale, and their involvement was not too very high. And if at all it was their involvement, it was on smaller intervention work in urban areas, in institutions. So the period from 1947 till the period of 1991, you had a strange era, an era in which the Gandhian work and the work they did, based on lifelong commitments, based on work in which they did not salary, vis-a-vis a social work where training was involved, where salary was involved. So this is where my argument is, the question of legitimacy came, because for a social work person, when you see around you that so much of work is done by the Gandhian institutions and Gandhian personalities, that you are not as effective as they are. So somewhere the question is unstated, that how legitimate is social work training? And it is this legitimacy feeling which led to professional social work educators to question the effectiveness of their own profession. Here I would like to mention one more name, Acharya Vinoba Bhave. And in Dr. Gore's memoirs, he mentions that there was a meeting in Delhi called by the Home Minister. And he was invited as director of TISS. He said, when I went for the meeting, I found that there are many other people, also a representative from Paunar Ashram. Paunar Ashram is the abode of Acharya Vinoba Bhave. So those were the times when these personalities had direct access to the corridors of power in Delhi. In those days, I don't think social work really had those kind of access. So the era till 1947 to 1991 was an era when social work educators were not too sure of exactly where they were heading to and how effective was their profession. And in comparison, you had large number of Gandhian workers. You had Baba Amte doing immense work with leprosy patients. The post-1991 era, things started to change. And my submission is that eventually social work found answers to the legitimacy question. And the answers came, my answer I'm putting in two parts. The first part is in about 3-4 decades, by 90s, 2000, social work had produced a large number of graduates. And they were there in the field and they themselves were manning several of the voluntary organizations. The voluntary organizations were forced to take trained people. But these were the organizations who 20, 25 years back had said lifelong commitment is enough. So that had changed. The second point is social work, in spite of all its weaknesses and inadequacies, had interventions. Maybe it was institution-based, maybe it was urban-based, but they were there. And broadly, if you look at the Indian process of transformation, it is not a revolutionary process. It is a more an evolutionary process. And if it is an evolutionary process, then the social work intervention methodology of working with individuals, groups, communities, and families, it fits. Because this methodology does not demand any radical change. It is change which is incremental. So these two things slowly led to a situation where social law practice started becoming stronger and stronger. And the third, the strength of social work training is their dissertation or project work. Most social work graduates, as far as I know, they are familiar with the research process and also they know how to handle data. They know something of data. And as the Indian society and economy is changing, these kind of trained people can find more easily jobs. So these are the three changes within social work. At the same time, the Indian state also are aspiring to become a developmental state. The state is reaching out to all communities, to all areas of geographical areas of India. They want to embark on big programs. And in these programs, trained social workers fits either at the policy level or at least at the implementing level. If you look at, I do not know about other states, but at least in the district of Nagpur, under the Domestic Violence Act, every block has a one trained MSW person. Under the POSCO Act, every block has one trained MSW person. All the police stations in Nagpur have employed one person, MSW, to take care of POSCO cases. So the nature of the state has changed, and they are now, and this has helped social work to establish itself. So broadly, my submission is the relevancy challenge has been answered and social work has been established. And Professor Sajid, I think he made a statement that social work has had some achievements, some accomplishments. Now I come to the relevance question. I'll just make two concluding remarks. One, that as the market structures go stronger and stronger, and markets will disrupt traditional structures, and it will bring out the individual from the collective, and individualism will become more and more stronger. The Indian society will turn somewhat like the American society, and the American curriculum could be as relevant as any other curriculum in India. With this, I end. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for curtailing you, but I think time constraint, and without any more delay, I invite Professor Minai for his session.
Good afternoon. I can fully empathize with whoever is left in this room without tea and trying to be awake. I will not do the niceties. I will come straight to the point of what I want to say. But before I proceed, I want to clarify that when I use the word deconstructing, I am actually not talking about the fans of Jacques Derrida and Gramsci who are in this room, but rather from a very clear reducing it to parts and understanding it. So a lot has been said about how social work has proceeded, and also I will not get into this, how the Tata Institute was established. But the fact is that we have not had a lot of effort to examine the utility of Western thought to the Indian conditions or to codify the Indian knowledge systems at all. But the terms making social work indigenous basically has been used in Africa and Asia more than in India. And it's now being used in India in recent times. So the argument is that a new field of knowledge development, namely indigenized social work, could be emerging, which is independent of its imported origins, stands on its own in addressing its own local problems, and provides its own local training and textbooks. So what it means is that all social work knowledge is to be led by the local realities, culture, values, behavior, and practices, and should be contextual and culturally relevant. So there have been lots of debates around indigenization, decolonization, and Indianization as processes. However, as Susa Rive, an African gentleman, puts it in the context of Uganda, decolonization needs to precede indigenization to facilitate the undoing of past and ongoing colonialism, which will allow then for genuine recentering of the once devalued and marginalized indigenous knowledges, theories, philosophies, and models. Decolonization for them involves two sides. One, questioning, challenging, decentering the current privileging of the white Western worldviews and ways of knowing and conceptualizing social work, and centering of alternative knowledge systems and constructions of social work that are more important for the lived experiences of the people that we are working with. So the problem with the concept of indigenization is that ideas can be received and implemented, ideas can be received and modified and implemented, or newly generated ideas can be used as a product. But Ugabe basically cautions us that indigenization is a failed project. Why? Because international frameworks have proved remarkably resilient and impervious to cultural transformation and continue to dominate across diverse contexts. So there are two main challenges when we talk of this. One is the imperialism of the Western knowledge and its saleability in the international market, the global competitiveness and international marketability of our graduates, and the shunning and marginalization of local epistemologies, making the indigenous project very challenging and almost difficult, impossible to implement. We also need to be mindful of the fact that there is this white Western hegemony, which we have been subjected to since the early 90s in the form of maybe the structural adjustment program and other things. So, but what the critics of indigenization basically say is that indigenization leads to maintaining the status quo by integrating, incorporating, including, adding indigenous knowledges, cultures, models, and adapt Western models in the mainstream social work practice. So the argument is that decolonization has to come prior to indigenization, because decolonization is the critical process that will create the space and opportunity for the indigenous ways of being and knowing to take their rightful central space. So the goal of decentralization first is to dismantle the very structures of colonization and colonial thinking that continue to relegate the local knowledge, experiences, models, and voices. So we know that the British colonial impact, we've just heard people talk about it. But when you read the history, I find two very interesting things that come out of the British colonial practices. One is, and which shaped the future of India, one is the ideas of modernization and the national movement. So we find that there is a lot of the rise of social reform movements during this period on child marriage, sati, polygamy, and others. They were all influenced by ideas such as liberty, equality, fraternity, freedom, and human rights coming from the Renaissance, the Reformation movement, and so on and so forth. And this appealed to some people and influenced the freedom movement also. So we have been a fairly caring society. We have huge accounts of kings and people who have been very charitable to a very large extent. So how do we kind of decolonize? So the underlying assumption of decolonization is that the effect of colonization has been extreme on all the cultures, or very profound, negative, and enduring. It still continues. And therefore, it is not an event that took place after colonization, but it is a process of challenging the cultural and epistemic legacies of colonialism. Mahatma Gandhi's rejection of Western universalist notions, Edward Said's critique of Orientalism, and others pushed the boundaries and challenged the universality of Western thought, igniting the process of decolonization. Also, we are facing neocolonialism in the form of a lot of policies that are being imposed on us. So when we look at the social work profession, we normally kind of bifurcate it into knowledge, values, and interventions. So if you take up, I have a longish thing, so I think I'll maybe, whenever she asks me, I'll have to close it. So when we talk of decolonization of knowledge, that basically means questioning who has the power over knowledge production, dissemination, and management, and eventually decentering those sources of power by bringing in others who are marginalized by colonization. That is the first thing that knowledge production needs to do, by bringing people who have been marginalized for a long time into the center, so that their knowledge can be used as social work knowledge. However, the most interesting concept is the concept of the colonization of mind that was given by the Kenyan theorist Nyang Thiogo in his Decolonizing the Mind book that he wrote. And he said, colonialism's most important area of domination was the mental universe of the colonized, the control through culture of how people perceive themselves and their relationship to the world. Colonialism detonated a cultural bomb that almost annihilated people's beliefs in their language, heritage, and environment, and made them regard their own cultural background as a wasteland of non-achievement that had to be left behind as quickly as possible. Western cultural expressions and Western ways of knowing became and remained the benchmark, and all other traditions are to be measured against those traditions as well. And therefore, one of the challenges of decolonization would be to look at knowledge production, to be able to develop a more rooted and responsive knowledge system, and critically re-examine the epistemology of the present knowledge system and look at knowledge from an Indian epistemological perspective. Now, my basic contention here is, I will not go into detail, I have a very detailed paper on this, that there is a fundamental difference in the epistemology of the West and in the epistemology of the East. And no amount of indigenization is going to resolve this whole idea. Western epistemology is looking at knowledge from a very different perspective, and Eastern epistemology looks at knowledge from a very different perspective. And therefore, we have to understand that the dominant paradigm of Western science is universality, and a lot of us are producing knowledge from that perspective, not from the perspective of the Indian epistemology. So these have a lot of bearing on how knowledge is produced and validated. And empiricism and rationalism are the sources of knowledge for the West, while Indian epistemology recognizes our innate sense of knowing, our inner consciousness, a spiritual component, and considers it as the basis of knowledge. So the basic characteristic of Indian culture is an integrated approach, not only to knowledge, but to life. So everything is put into one particular package when you look at the Indian knowledge tradition. So there has been a kind of a epistemicide on us by the Western onslaught, and we have not been able to stand up to that. So the indigenous cultures focus on the holistic understanding of the whole that emerged from the millennium of their existence and experiences. And traditional Western worldviews tend to be more concerned with science and concentrate on compartmentalized knowledge and then focus on understanding the bigger related picture. Now, there's another very interesting article that I read, and I think it has lessons for all of us here. There's a blog by Pushpa here which says, "Do not colonize decolonization." And she cautions that as part of training, all of us almost have been trained in westernized white social work. We travel, learn, and encourage cultural expression, and we have token representation from marginalized groups as well. And we believe in good faith that we are promoting non-Western cultures, but that is not the case. She also cautions that although we say we encourage native languages, yet we continue to derive privilege from operating in power structures like this Congress, where we use the language of the colonizers. We continue to be looking at people when you recruit, whether a person can speak English well. Our life target is to have publications in Western publications, Scopus indexed, and so on and so forth. And therefore, there is a risk that in this whole decolonization, we are concentrating power in ourselves rather than giving it to the subaltern, the dispossessed that actually should be coming at the center. So it's almost like a Freirean concept. If you remember, the oppressed, instead of striving for liberation, tend themselves to become oppressors. So we are in a situation where we think we are solving a problem, but we become part of the problem, and then we might be very, very happy that I have 5 publications in Scopus Index and British Journal of Social Work also. So therefore, we need to work on establishing a new order in which particular languages and cultures are not considered the best or the ideal. We might find, because of that we are no longer at the center. Right now, all of us who can speak English are at the center of all the discussions. But once you promote this, we will not be at the center. And we need to be clear how comfortable are we with this idea. Also, we have with this misplaced self-belief that who have been educated in Western colonized education, that we are best placed to initiate and culminate this process of decolonization. So we have to actually take a call as to whether we need to yield this position of power to other people, other languages, traditional knowledge of the Indian system to come center stage and us to take backstage to be able to make sense of what is happening in India. That is one part that I wanted to talk about. The other is that in the Indian system, even if you leave out colonialism and other such, we have always had hierarchies, we have always had vulnerable and marginalized, and whose traditional ways of knowing and being we slowly crushed and threatened to annihilate by the dominant groups. These marginalized groups, the subalterns, they were made to believe by us that their knowledge systems and practices were not fit to be practiced in the Indian scheme of things. They were close to savages, and that they actually abandon their own system and adopt the norms, culture, and practice of those above them. So in a sense, there are multiple layers of colonialism if you look at the Indian scenario, and it's almost like a hierarchy. And so the challenge is great. As we have been hearing a lot about the Indian knowledge systems, we know we have a large treasury of ancient knowledge, sculpture, architecture, philosophy, logic, mathematics, yoga, and that's been acknowledged the world over. However, we need to examine why this knowledge was restricted to only a small section of society. Or was there a conscious epistemic violence or an act of enclosing knowledge, limiting access to knowledge, exerting a form of control through knowledge for the purpose of leadership, and so on and so forth. So if you remember when we studied PRA, there were two simple questions that always kind of are at the back of my mind. One was, whose reality counts? And the other one was, who counts reality? So it's basically, we have to see where we are kind of standing. So if we want to decolonize knowledge, it will have to be led by those whose language, culture, and ways of life have been colonized several times over. There will have to be greater representation of the colonized beyond the token representation that we have. And we will have to yield our position of power to them and learn their language to be able to listen to them. So unfortunately, we have all become parties, if not pawns, in the colonial game, furthering the colonial agenda knowingly or unknowingly. So we need to reflect on our role in sustaining the colonization by writing, conversing, using Western philosophies and thoughts, and publishing in coveted journals in the language of the colonialists. Do I have time? Okay. Now, let's come to the values part. Obviously, Indian philosophy is too vast for anyone to come and talk about. With multiple faith traditions, including Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, tribal faith traditions, they've all contributed to the societal value systems of values of charity, social justice, nature, dignity. All this has always been part of India. But there's one particular thing that must have struck everyone in the last couple of months, and that is this whole idea of the phrase Vasudeva Kutumbakam. And what it means is the whole world is one family. Yeah. So if you see, this is very inclusive concept. It has the ability to confront and solve the global problems, and it has been the core philosophy of the Indian society, because it gives a sense of oneness to our common humanity, our common development goals, our common quest for global order and international peace. So if you look at the whole verse, the shloka basically says, this is very interesting, I quote, "This is mine, that is his, say the small-minded. The wise believe that the entire world is a family." Now, look at the impact of this if you want to use this as a value system for social work. It's a very clear pointer that to possess or claim ownership over thoughts, resources, etc. is the work of small-minded. And the wise believe that the entire world is one family, meaning thereby all resources on this earth belong to all. And therefore, the interconnection of cultures, geographies, the obligation to those who have been kind of left behind and those yet to benefit from development. And therefore, one of the aspects of this thing originating from one earth, one family, one future is the concept of knowledge democracy, that is acknowledging the importance of the existence of multiple epistemologies and ways of knowing. And in India, we have organic ways of knowing, spiritual ways of knowing, and land-based ways of knowing, and the knowledge of the marginalized and the excluded everywhere, which we sometimes refer to as subaltern knowledge. Now, Shiv Vishwanathan actually added to this concept by giving the idea of cognitive justice. The cognitive justice basically sensitizes us not only to forms of knowledge, but also to the diverse communities of problem solving. And finally, knowledge democracy is about open access for the sharing of knowledge so that everyone who needs knowledge will have access to it. Knowledge democracy is about intentionally linking values of justice, fairness, and action to the process of using knowledge. So this, I just, for example, took one value. There are so many other values, Seva, Paramadharma, Nishkam Seva, and other values that can be read that can help us in developing some of these things. But there's also some kind of sometimes you find a slight disconnect. For example, a lot of the recent changes that have come about in the Indian system have been because of public opinion. And public opinion is public values. For example, the age of consent for adolescent sexual acts with respect to POSCO, whatever changes we talked about, the lowering of age of juveniles post Nirbhaya, institutionalization versus family strengthening with respect to child protection, reconciliation as the first resort in marital discords, same-sex marriage, LGBTQ rights, where traditional Indian value systems have taken precedence over Western value systems, and the Indian systems of governance have actually upheld the Indian traditions. Even courts have upheld those Indian traditions. So that means that there is some kind of an assertion that is taking place. And lastly, in terms of methods and interventions, I would basically say that in spite of there being a lot of uniform global kind of documents available, we have also perfected our own system. For example, the village panchayat system, the Mahila panchayats, the development of local leadership, the use of peer groups, use of faith-based leaders and organizations for community mobilization, religious charitable motivation. So some localization has taken place in terms of intervention also. And India was among the most enthusiastic when it came to HIV, when they said ABC of HIV. We said we are with you on A and B, which meant abstain and be faithful, which were Indian values. We didn't go for C because it was about condom use. We didn't like that. But as far as A and B was concerned, we were at the forefront of that. So this tension between universalism and particularism will continue. For example, the concepts of women's empowerment and agency, they have been borrowed from CEDAW and other places. But interventions like Mahila Panchayat, as I said, are very, very Indian. When it comes to UNCRC, we are always saying that we are very, very interested. But the Indian society doesn't agree with the whole range of child rights, particularly in matters of child autonomy and participation. And this is one thing that I want to ask practitioners. When you talk about child participation, why is it that only children from the slums have to participate? Why is it that not your children are not participating? Is the UNCRC only meant for slum children? Why not for your own children? So these kind of discords, they have to be really, really taken care of. Basically, there's also the last part that I want to say, that whenever the high income countries devise something, it gets quickly imported into the lower income countries as best practices. But what we do doesn't get to the outside world as a great idea. Therefore, there is an unbalanced transfer of ideas. For example, I'll just give you two examples and then I close. One is, I have this personal experience. When you work with international projects, the first thing that the international agencies will say, what is the user fee that we are going to charge from people, whether it is for family planning or what or otherwise. You're talking of user fee. The second example is, all people from mental health and psychiatric background follow the international classification of diseases and DSM-4, TR, ++, and all that. These are all Western products. These are products of a Western biomedical conception of health and mental health. They do not address the Indian context at all. And therefore, you are using them to diagnose something which is not there, and then using a Western model to treat them which is not there. So I will just close this small talk of mine by saying that we will have to acknowledge and practice inclusivity and social justice and engage with homegrown forms of oppression and marginalization also. At the same time, we cannot afford to blindly reject Western epistemology and knowledge. Vivek Yadav, in a recent Indian Express article, said, we must chart a middle path in the decolonization project. So Dipto Kaviraj, a political scientist, he says, we must climb the edifying ladder of Western theory to learn what it means to theorize, But once the time comes to think for ourselves, we should have the self-confidence to kick the ladder away. And lastly, I end with a quote from Gandhi. The idea is not about shutting the windows of one's house to winds blowing from the outside, but rather not allowing oneself to be swept off one's feet. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a very enlightening talk on a very, very relevant theme that we need to cover in this session. And our last, but not the least, speaker for the present session is Professor Ramai. He's going to speak on the theme itself, leave no one behind. Why should we revisit the pedagogies and practices of social work profession? Yes, sir.
Am I visible? Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Manu, for this opportunity, particularly Professor Said for inviting me this. I am here only to make two important points with regard to the theme of this seminar. That's leave no one behind. That's the first part of the seminar. Now, if you look at the spirit behind this phrase, leave no one behind, it is a very ancient phrase, I would say. As our earlier speaker pointed out, that we had something called Vasudeva Kudumbakam. You are trying to see everybody as part of one family, not to leave anybody behind. That's what actually. And if you go even centuries before, in Tamil poet, there is Hum Gundanar who says, Yadumure Yavarum Kelir. It basically means every place is your place and every person is your family member, which is a many century old positions. Then you also have Baujan Sukhaya and Baujan Hitaya Cha, which is also in essence, it's the same spirit that leave no one behind. And now we also have a political position saying that Sabke Saath, Sabka Vikas. This is also the spirit behind is leave no one behind. But almost all these saying, century-old saying, but still a vast majority is left behind. Still vast majority is left behind. And this is a reality. This is that reality even today. In such a scenario, we as professional social workers take on our shoulder this such an important responsibility. Let us not leave anybody behind. Let us work together so that nobody is left behind. Is what we have taken up on. That's the seminar says, right? If that is our concern, the next part is why we focus only on pedagogy, as if many people are left behind because of pedagogy problem. Is that so? Or there is something fundamentally wrong? When Tamil poet said, everybody is part of our family, everybody is a kith and kin, he wanted to treat that way, but he could not succeed because he was an individual and he couldn't do more than just talking about it. Then this Baujan Sukhaya and Baujan Hitaya, also similar situation. They cried and cried, nothing happened. Ultimately, again, it went as an individual cry. But now we have a Vasudeva Kudumbakam, our earlier speaker mentioned about it. There's somewhere, and then decolonizing social work. This is I need to explain this together. On the one hand, we are saying Vasudeva Kudumbakam, we believe in very nice, absolutely nice. That's what it's a very good value we as Indians should cherish. But then why did we chase the British out? They are also part of the family. If Vasudeva Kudumbakam, we should not have allowed the British to get out of the country. But we all fought together to chase them out. Why? Because we found somewhere we were exploited by them, right? So any exploitation, you want to give up that Vasudeva Kudumbakam concept. No, you are exploiting. I don't believe in Vasudeva Kudumbakam. So you should go out. If we agree this principle, any kind of exploitation, that fellow should be thrown out of the place. That there are also exploiters within the nations. Don't think there are exploiters from outside nations, so you can say throw them out. But when there is exploitation within nation, what will you do? See, in Ambedkar, one of the lecture, he says, there is an apartheid in every village. There is an apartheid in every village. In every village, there are British colonizers. In every village, there are colonizers. What will you do? As social workers, have you ever questioned, have you ever thought about it? Because whenever selectively we quote these values, family is our values, Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam is our values, very nice whenever you want. But when the exclusion, exploitation is very much within, whom will you throw? We have to throw each other. What else? I'll throw you, you will throw me out. The problem lies here. Decolonizing social work, it is fine. I am with it. And replace it with what? Colonial philosophy is fine. Replace it with what? Brahmanism? When I am saying Brahmanism, I am not referring to any community. It's an ideology. And that is why even among scheduled castes today, there is untouchability. Among scheduled castes, there is untouchability. So here we are not saying to this particular community is bad, this community is good. No, no. It is an ideology. I know very good Brahmins, completely liberal-minded Brahmins. I know very, very conservative Dalits who practice untouchability. So this is the reality. So when I am saying Brahmanism, please don't mistake me that I am referring to a community. I am referring to an ideology like Marxism, Brahmanism. So the first part, leave no one behind, is definitely a concern for all of us. And I also feel bad. And it is such a big responsibility, mind you, social workers. You have taken a big responsibility, which many predecessors could not do anything. Now you have ventured to solve this problem and you think that you will champion this. But then with that responsibility comes that you also have to keep in mind the core values of social work, which talks about social justice, which talks about worth of the relationship with the other persons and the world outside. What is how much you are committed to this? Social justice, for example. Now today, sab log government ka damate because there is EW reservation. Nobody is left out of the purview of reservation. Everybody is a government ka damat now, today. Everybody is a government damat, I think, thanks to the government for EW's reservation. So everybody is brought under reservations. Now, whom will you blame? Everybody is covered, the state. Now, the government has recognized social justice as a way of bringing change in the society. But we as social workers, do we still really believe, have we internalized social justice as a principle in our day-to-day life? Now, coming to that, the second part, pedagogy. Field work is said to be the signatory pedagogy of social work profession. All of us know. Field work is the signatory pedagogy of the social work professions. What is the principle inbuilt in that? That in order to convince a students about what is the role, what is the reality, what should be his engagement, we are sending them to the field to expose them what you see today in the field is the reality. You should be prepared to face that reality. That's what actually the logic. But as individuals, as social workers, whether we agree with all that you see in the field and agree with it, yes, there is untouchability, there is discriminations. Are you really against untouchability? Are you really against caste discriminations? If that is so, probably you may have to give up your caste identity itself, which I don't want to give up. Why should I give it? Because I'm an upper caste, I don't want to give, because that gives me a lot of privilege whenever I go to a public platform. So I don't want to give up. What I'm trying to say, there is a contradiction, inherent contradictions. That on the one hand, I cherish my identity as a Brahmin or as a Dalit or as a Muslim or as a Hindu, as a Christian. But when I see students should go to the field and see there is caste discrimination, there is atrocity, you must deal with it. When I myself is not ready as a social work teacher, as a professional, as a practitioner, I am not ready. I'm not willing to give up my caste identity. How do you expect that students should give up? And that is why even university campuses, there is untouchability, there is atrocity, there is discriminations on religious line, on caste lines happening on even in social work institute. and we on a day-to-day basis we face. So somewhere we may talk about Gandhian philosophy. There is also Ambedkarian philosophy. When you talk about Gandhian philosophy, you cannot ignore Ambedkar. Where he will go, poor fellow. When you say Brahmanism as a great idea, there is also Buddhism emerged. Today, colonial force has a 300 years old history. Brahmanism is 5th century, 6th century onwards. Now, for everything you blame the colonial force as if they are the culprit. Before that, everything was fine. That's also against the truth, against the facts. Why Brahmanism emerged? Why Sikhism emerged? There was sati. There was forced widowhood, child marriage. Was it colonial contribution, these factors, or our own part of glorious traditions? We as social workers, did we ever confronted those challenges? Did we add anything in curriculum saying that these issues are a real issue? You need to fully engage on these things, and you have to revise curriculum on those lines. Did we ever engage ourselves in those kind of things? In TISS, we tried our best, and we have a well-meaning colleagues here, and we have done that. We would say that we have made some headway through it. But in the large part of India, nobody knows. Social work means casework, group work, community organization, and few bullet points, nothing else. I know that. We don't go on beyond that. How these caseworkers are connected to caste question, how these casework is connected to social exclusion, how this is connected to gender discrimination. There is no discussion, there is no curriculum at all. So when we are saying it is fine, decolonizing social work is very necessary. But that is not the end of it. That's not the end of it. I mean, the reality, the colonizer left, then somebody else colonized. And that is why I still feel there is so much of colonization in everywhere and throughout India. Various forms of exclusion still exist. If we really believe, once the British is out, we got independence, we are in an illusion, complete illusion. Or maybe we chose to be in that illusion. So that colonial do not come, nobody else come, I remain in power. So somewhere we need to pedagogy means critical engagement to understand reality. Because your epistemology of looking at the reality is different from my epistemology of looking at the reality. And these are contradictory epistemology. So unless we come on certain concepts that minimum needs program, we need to come together. Now you're saying indigenizing social work in India. What will be your ideals? Where will you draw your ideals from? You draw your ideals from Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, and all again this goes Buddhist ideology. When you see Indian ideology, Indianizing social work, what would be the core values? We agree, I fully agree, I agree with the diversity. But you must have certain common understanding as to what to engage. In the absence of that, because we do not have the Indian ideology, because ultimately your ideology comes from your religion. The caste you are affiliated to, the religion you are affiliated to, the ethnicity you are affiliated to. And these are contradictory, many times contradictory. So when you have so many ideologies, as earlier speaker said that we must have a tribal social work, which will say colonial force is bad, rest is fine. You say Dalit social work, which will say only Brahmins are bad, colonial is fine. Or if you say Muslim ideology, will say the Hindus are bad. Or the Hindus will say Muslims are bad. These are core reality, my dear. In such a scenario, what do you mean by indigenizing social work? And when you say pedagogy, will you take the students to the history, or you will take the students to the field today? As of now, we are taking the students to the field today. And the reality today, what exists, we see this is the challenge. But when you have to take these students to the history, which is again a very highly contradiction, lot of contradiction in our history, because it's not written in a manner it should have been written. So again, your epistemology changes. Then you will justify whatever bad thing was going on in the past. This is the right thing, let us go. This is the Indian social work. So these challenges are going to be there before us when we are trying to have an ideology, our core values rooted in our own traditions. So somewhere we need to be very cautious when you are saying that we need to have our own core values rooted in our own traditions. We have to see that they do not contradict each other, and probably that may result in more divisions among us as Indian society. The Constitution has taken a line that you can build a nation only through liberty, equality, social justice, and fraternity. Now, when you say fraternity, is nothing but a we feeling oneness, we as a nation, we as people of India. Interestingly, as many of you would know, that at the time of framing the Indian Constitution, some people wanted we the Indians, and Dr. Ambedkar said, no, we are not yet Indians. We are not yet Indians. We may take decades, we don't know how many years. That time we may write we Indians, but right now let us write only we, the people of India, and work towards very consciously so that sooner we become we, the Indians. We still not become Indians. We still remain the people of India with diverse background and not agreeing with each other. And the Constitution way of achieving that give liberty to everybody, give liberty to every individual, every community. Liberty of various kinds have been listed in the preamble itself. Give equality of various kinds, again listed in the preamble. Recognize social justice as a way of correcting the wrong thing that has happened historically. And this will give an opportunity for every citizens to realize, to own this nation as my nations. When I don't experience liberty, when I don't experience equality, definitely it will be difficult for me to say, these are my fellow citizens. If I face subjugation within your own family, when you get beaten by your wife, or you end up beating your wife, will you love each other? Immediately we go to the court, I no more. Even within family with whom you lived for quite long time, we are not willing to compromise. On a national level, so long, many years we have lived together, and you deny liberty, equality, and still expect them people to no, we are bye. Bye cannot be just by force. Every bhai should experience liberty, equality. Can social work towards those lines at least? Forget about all those things. Can social work dedicate itself, revise its curriculum in such a manner that it gives opportunity for every student to understand the importance of liberty, importance of equality, importance of social justice? Naturally, it is these universal ideas which will result in infusing a sense of oneness, fraternity, and that is how nation can be built. Nation become nation, one nation, only when there is liberty and equality and social justice. In the absence of liberty, equality, we are in a way trying to cheat ourselves. I think let social work not be party to that kind of a cheating, I would say. I'm using very crudely those words because it's a social work fraternity will understand the spirit behind using these words. So with those few words, thank you, Chair, for a lovely opportunity. Thank you once again.
Thank you for raising certain hard-hitting but very core questions that we need to acknowledge, we need to confront and engage with. So we have now come to an end of the four very engaging sessions that we've had, and the organizers have permitted us a small time frame for questions that we may feel like asking from the resource persons. So we can take 3 or 4 questions to any of the esteemed panelists, if you so wish.
Hello everyone. I am Dr. Pradeep Kumar Sahu from Bhubaneswar, Odisha. Actually, I have a very major concern. In my state, around 50 institutions are offering social work education, and none of them are government institutions. And all the institutions are not following the minimum standard, and because of what I have understood, because of profit, since they are all private institutions. So in this platform, I think actually minimum standard, if the minimum standard of education will not be maintained, definitely later it is coming to a question to us to our fraternity that these people are not maintaining minimum quality when they are working in different institutions. And ultimately, our association, our fraternity is getting blamed. So how to maintain the minimum standard of education, and how to at least open departments in the government institution. That is one of my concern, and all stalwarts are present over here. They can at least give solution to this. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Professor Desai.
Who decides the minimum standards, according to you? As a profession, have we worked on minimum standards? Yes, we did have one assignment that NAC gave to Tata Institute, where a seminar was organized with experts from all over India. And they laid down minimum standards. But then NAC itself was not yet ready to evaluate, assess discipline-wise programs, such as social work. So that report, those minimum standards are not binding. And new schools of social work don't even know those standards exist, because NAC itself has kind of forgotten them. So it is today free for all, actually, very sadly. Okay, so we have to find a kind of quality control from within the School of Social Work today, because there is no body, and that is why we are making all this importance for a National Council for Social Work, which will lay down those minimum standards, which doesn't exist.
In the private mode, either the private practice or in some government institution, different departments like anthropology, sociology, they are doing it. So accordingly, as per their advantage, they are hijacking the syllabus, everything, and they want to run the course as per their benefit. So when we are talking about minimum standard, so actually minimum standard is not at all maintained. I think if NAPSWI can intervene, the quality can be maintained, and people will at least think about the minimum standard where the private agencies are running social work.
Question raised. Yes. Thank you very much, Sahu, for raising such questions for which we are very serious from the last 1 decade. Our senior professors from the social work discipline, from the last 10 years, 2 times they drafted the bill for the National Council of Social Work. In the system, if any bill to be passed, definitely there is need of the political campaigning. As far as the institution is concerned, NAPSWI, not only NAPSWI, other state level social work bodies association. I am not only the institution, organization, the state level organization of the social work, they took the part in the campaign run under the chairmanship of Professor Murli Desai ji, Professor Sanjay Bhatt, and other professors. Therefore, regularly we are insisting in the morning session, the regulation session, I just raised the question that we did not forget the objectives of the National Council. Very soon, a special drive we will start, and the way how the bill is passed in the parliament, we have to just move in that particular path to get it passed. Very soon, very soon. I made request the madam in the morning, day before yesterday, I asked Professor Bhatt Sahab, NAPSWI alone cannot do it. NAPSWI is a platform which just invite you all to be the part of it. And with the pressure, with their strength, we can ask the government that without bill, you cannot ensure the quality of education. NEP 2020 completely say that we are serious about the quality of education. We have to say, we have to convince the government. This is one of the organization running from 1936. We are responsible to imparting direct services to the society in the different. Our Professor Ajay Kumar Sahab from the Marth Seva Sansthan, he presented the very good view. The The first community development program which was started, the man was from the social work, the pilot project, Sugat Das Gupta, took the responsibility. And laterally, Jay Prakash Nayan invited him to take that responsibility as a director to link social sciences, how to social sciences can be used for the betterment of society. So definitely, the great Acharya like Sugat Das Gupta and other people just did tremendous job. I hope in near future we will achieve it. Thank you very much for raising this question. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Sudarshan.
I want to respond to both the speakers, what you have presented, and also questions that have come. I'm reflecting on both what is the social work situation in India, because I have stayed constant touch with what is happening in India. And also I know what is going on in the US. So in the US, there are three arms that promote social work profession, education, and all that. One, social work education part, that is one arm. We have a national council on social work education that accredits all social work programs, undergraduate and graduate programs. And it has come up with a competency-based education. So a lot of discussion on the content, what should we be accomplishing and how we prepare social workers, that's a question. But the one answer that we came up, we used to have 2008 and before, it was content-based. We put together some content, what's supposed to be the curriculum of social work, and that was taught. In 2008, first time in the US, competence-based education model was adopted. There was a lot of national deliberation. And the three arms that are there, social work education arm, National Association of Social Workers, which is equivalent to the NAPSWI. So social workers organization, they advocate for the rights and employment conditions and all that of social workers. Then the third is social work regulation, licensing and regulation. So these three arms, they're separate organizations. They have their own boards and governing or structure, but there is a coordinating mechanism among them. So the all are concerned with social work. Okay, both education, practice, and what should be the conditions for social work and what we should be working for. So those things. So all three were involved in coming up with the competencies for social work. So there is an agreement, what should be social workers doing in practice and what should be taught. In order to do that work, what should be taught. So there is a clear communication, and we have gone through the three iterations of that. 2008, we have passed that, and then 2015, we have revised the standards, and 2022, we have revised again. Every 8 years, standards are revisited, updates are made, all that. So that is one thing that what I'm seeing missing here in India is accreditation body is not there. Of course, UGC handles, but there is no clear mandate where if a program is not following the standards, national standards, EPAS we call it, educational standards and policies, if they're not following, what is the process? In the US, they are de-accredited. There is a process for it. They give the warning, advice, and if they are not following it, they will be de-accredited. And no one will get license, can get to practice if they not graduating from the accredited programs. I cannot practice social work if I am not having a degree from accredited program. If I do that, I can be jailed.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Sudarshan. You know, the contexts are a little different in the US and in India, where we have multiple stakeholders, you see, who have to also be accommodated in our quest for professionalization of social work. So it is not as easy as it is for you, you know, in the US. Yes, yes, yes. So one more question and that will be all. Yes. All right. Yes, please.
My question is regarding decolonization, as Professor Ramaya has pointed out. And I'm very much in favor of decolonization, indigenization. I understand all these things are very much required. But while I was studying in TISS, I remember that I was told that you are a social worker and you might have to go anywhere in the world. You must be prepared to go anywhere in the world. And that is the basic understanding we had. And it is also an universal profession. And I myself now teach the history philosophy paper. And there we have these things like history of social work in UK or history of social work in USA, which we teach there. And we teach with this understanding that the modern social work in India has somewhat the professional modern social work in India. If we leave aside the social reform movements and religious charities aside, then it has its linkages with industrial revolution and the way social work has started in West. So in that context, how much the decolonization is actually possible, or to what extent we can decolonize our curricula. That is point number one. And the point number two is that
Can we just take one and let him answer?
it is a related question, Professor Agnamitra. Point number two is that in the name of decolonization, we are seeing in other social science disciplines, sometimes the things which are being incorporated actually which you are saying is Brahmanical in essence. So I'm afraid that that might also happen in the case of social work. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah. So what you raised initially is a valid question, but we have to actually understand what are we preparing students for. And I think this is something that Professor Sajid also raised, talking in times of international social work and preparing students for cross-border work and other things, and also at the same time talking about Indian context. So that is a valid point that will always be there. And I pointed out in my small talk also that the glamour of that competitive UN, WHO kind of thing is going to be is one of the challenges that is there. And they are the ones who, the bodies themselves want us to do all that work for them because we are cheap labor. That is one part. The second question that you raised, can you just repeat? So just give me a reference to that. Yeah, the Brahmanical part. Okay, so that is that is a problem with indigenization, not with decolonization, as I put it today. Decolonization would mean all of us would leave the room for people who have been oppressed by us or by our ancestors or people close to us, and give them that space to come and take center stage. And then that whatever knowledge they bring, that would be indigenous knowledge, not knowledge which I have. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I endorse. There should be a clear understanding that when I say decolonization, it's not only British going out. Whoever held power and colonized, subjugated local, that's what it means, and that's clarified. I agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think you've been waiting for a long time. Yes.
I think I'm not from social science background, but I'm from medical background and into public health. So just wanted to have more understanding because we are discussing curricula and pedagogy. But like if there is no body which decides pedagogy or curriculum, then is it like really what we have authority? And I just wanted to understand, how do the schools decide what to offer under social work? Is it left to their own understanding? The second question, when it was coming to forming a social body, I was just trying to tell you like how medical associations, different fraternities have formed their bodies. It was basically 10, 15 people who formed an association and registered that association and then went on. And for example, Pediatric Association of India, Indian Medical Council, all of them were formed. So can NASPI, like Social Work Congress, think of starting something, registering them in this fashion and take it from there and get a legal entity to move on? Because unless you have that legal entity, it's very difficult to push and have political advocacy. And second is petition by social workers to form this council could be another way forward to have this council and accreditation body. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Bhatt?
Thank you, Dr. Nilesh. In fact, both the processes are already on in the social work profession. As far as the question who decides the curriculum, so far it was the UGC. And in 2001, UGC has established a center at Tata Institute, and that center headed by Dr. Murli Desai, and we have a model curriculum for social work. After that, in 2005, the NEC invited us and we have prepared a report how a social work institution should be evaluated on what parameter. Later on, everything was going on the way you know that it is going on, like in even medical education with the new national commission, and every council is now going to be turned out in a commission. So we have a national commission for allied and healthcare professionals. There we have a behavioral health council. Under behavioral health council, we have a medical, psychiatric, clinical, social workers. And now their course will be decided by that council. So the process is on. And in the new education policy, they call it professional standard setting bodies. Where council is not operating, there will be a professional standard setting bodies. So we have requested UGC that make a professional standard setting bodies. This is part one. Regarding the associations and others, there are parallel associations. NAPSWI fortunately representing a bigger chunk, but in the medical setting, there is a All India Association of Medical and Psychiatric Social Workers. So there are associations. And this, I believe, in any profession, this will go on. But at one point, it is going to synthesize. And that is what our effort all. And we invite everyone. We have an association which represents Indian psychiatric social workers. We have an association which is coming up for other movements also. So I think these will culminate when the subject discipline will come up. Now, many things are being decided by the new education policy. So as the friend has told me that new education policy has the first word, leave no one behind. So I think we can derive in new education policy while defining the certificate course in youth peace and for development, that how to design and develop with the mission and with the course vision, that what are the course objective under that guidelines. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Bhatt. I think we will end the session now. Thank you. I think this was the first plenary and it has set the ground for many, the future plenaries to be as invigorating, engaging, and, a lot of questions, lot of unanswered questions as well. But those definitely form the basis of our taking something away. I think the purpose of a plenary is that it gives us, a sense of having achieved something, yet it also gives us a sense of not having done anything significant, and that we still, there's still a lot of stones to be turned, right? So that we leave no one behind. Thank you very much. Thank you, audience, for a very patient listening, and thanks indeed to all the resource persons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No, fine. You can leave here. Yes, yes. Just quick announcements. So, dear participants, we are dispersing now. So, tea break is for tea break. Tea is outside. Is waiting for you. And after this tea break, we are having cultural evening at open air theater that is adjacent to the guest house, VIP guest house. So, please, after having tea, please reach there. And we'll be having 3-4 programs there. So we'll be having Kuchipudi, that is Adhra classical dance there. We'll be having Dastan Goi, we'll be having this Kawali. So please reach on time there. Okay, thank you very much.